Kevin Durant has now crossed $1 billion in career earnings, and that number alone is ridiculous. But here's the part almost everyone misses. That $1 billion isn't the story, because Durant didn't become financially powerful simply by signing bigger NBA contracts or collecting bigger endorsement checks. Forbes estimates that over the 12 months ending in May 2026, Durant earned $54.8 million on the court and another $49 million off it. And beyond those checks, he has invested in more than 80 companies through 35V while building Boardroom and taking ownership stakes in professional sports. So the interesting question isn't, how did Kevin Durant make $1 billion? It's, what did Kevin Durant do with the advantage that being Kevin Durant gave him? Because your basketball career isn't the business, it's the leverage. And once Durant understood that, he started making decisions that looked strange if you only looked at the paycheck, but made a lot more sense if you looked at what that paycheck could unlock. For most NBA stars, the obvious goal is simple: get the biggest contract possible, more years, more guaranteed money, more security. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Durant has shown that sometimes he's willing to give up immediate money to buy something else: flexibility. In October 2025, after joining the Houston Rockets, Durant signed a 2-year, $90 million extension. Forbes noted that the deal was roughly $30 million below the maximum he could have received, but it included a player option for 2027 to 28. That meant Durant wasn't simply accepting less money. He was preserving another decision point later. And this is where the outsmarted the NBA part of the story actually begins. Because Durant wasn't treating the contract as the final destination. He was treating it as a tool. A maximum deal gives you more money today, but flexibility can give you more choices tomorrow. And for someone who already had hundreds of millions in career earnings, the ability to control timing, location, and opportunity could be worth more than squeezing every last dollar out of one contract. That philosophy would show up again outside the NBA, because Durant was about to discover that one of the most valuable things his basketball career had given him wasn't money, it was access. When Durant joined the Golden State Warriors in 2016, the basketball world saw a superstar joining an already dominant team. Championships, rings, basketball, but Durant had also moved into the middle of Silicon Valley, and that changed the kind of people he could meet: founders, investors, technology executives, people building companies that could become enormous before the rest of the world even knew their names. And Durant suddenly had something those people couldn't simply buy: a massive audience. He wasn't just a rich investor walking into a startup meeting, he was Kevin Durant, a global athlete with millions of followers, an NBA platform, and credibility with an audience that companies desperately wanted. Forbes reported that while Durant was in the Bay Area, he built relationships with figures including Laurene Powell Jobs, Mark Andreessen, Ben Horowitz, and executives from Google and Apple. But here's the important distinction: being famous doesn't automatically make you a great investor. A celebrity can write a check. That doesn't mean they know which company will win. So Durant needed someone who understood how to turn that access into something bigger. And that's where Rich Kleeman entered the picture. Durant and Rich Kleeman eventually founded 35 Ventures, or 35V, in 2016. And 35V wasn't designed to be just a place where Durant parked his money. It became an umbrella for his business interests, investments, media projects, and brand. Boardroom identifies 35V as the company behind those interests, while Forbes has reported that the portfolio expanded across fintech, cryptocurrency, health and wellness, media, and technology. And this is where the strategy becomes visible. Instead of asking, what should Kevin Durant invest in? They could ask, where does Kevin Durant's presence actually create an advantage? That's a completely different question, because suddenly the investment isn't just about the money. It's about what Durant can bring to the company: attention, credibility, content, relationships, customers, athletes, brands. That becomes important when you look at one of the clearest examples: Postmates. In 2016, Durant invested roughly $1 million in Postmates through 35V. At the time, that wasn't some obvious billion-dollar winner. It was a startup competing in a crowded delivery market. But Durant had something more valuable than just the check. He could help create attention. Forbes later reported that when Uber was discussing a roughly $2.6 billion acquisition of Postmates in 2020, Durant's stake was estimated to have grown to around $15 million based on that valuation. That's the kind of story that makes the entire strategy easier to understand. Durant didn't simply put money into a company and walk away. His value as an investor could include the platform attached to his name, and that pattern wasn't limited to Postmates. 35V's portfolio has included companies such as Coinbase, Robinhood, SeatGeek, Whoop, and Dapper Labs, among many others. One of the most interesting was Coinbase. 35V participated in Coinbase's 2017 Series D round, when the company raised $100 million at a valuation of about $1.6 billion. Years later, 35V and Coinbase expanded their relationship into a strategic partnership involving Durant, Boardroom, content, and education around crypto and NFTs. Now the pattern is getting harder to ignore. The investment creates a relationship. The relationship creates access. The access creates opportunities. And sometimes the athlete's platform becomes part of the value he brings to the investment. But that still wasn't the biggest evolution, because eventually Durant stopped just investing in other people's businesses. He started building platforms of his own. In 2019, Durant and Kleiman launched Boardroom, a sports, media, and entertainment company focused on the business of sports and the people shaping it. Boardroom says it was founded by Durant and Kleiman and operates as a 35V company, with media, events, advisory work, and sports investments inside the broader ecosystem. At first, a media company might seem like a completely separate business. It isn't, because now Durant didn't just have access. He had a platform that could turn access into content. He could talk to athletes, executives, brands, investors, creators, and those conversations could become stories. Those stories could create attention. That attention could create relationships, and those relationships could create new opportunities. This is where 35V becomes more interesting than a list of investments. It's a network, and the network can reinforce itself. But there's an important question here. Is Durant actually a genius investor? Or does being Kevin Durant simply give him access that most investors will never have? Because that's the counter-argument. Maybe the secret isn't that Durant can predict which startup will explode. Maybe the secret is that his NBA career gives him a seat at tables most people never reach. And if that's true, then his greatest asset isn't the money he invests, it's the access he brings with him. That idea becomes even clearer when Durant starts buying pieces of the sports world itself. Durant didn't just want to make money from sports. He started owning pieces of it. In 2020, he purchased a stake in MLS's Philadelphia Union. In 2022, 35V became a minority investor in Gotham FC, and Durant and Kleiman also added a Major League Pickleball franchise. Forbes currently identifies Durant's stakes in Philadelphia Union, Gotham FC, and a Major League Pickleball franchise, while Boardroom lists the Brooklyn Aces, Gotham FC, and Philadelphia Union among its sports holdings. And Gotham is especially revealing. The investment wasn't simply money for equity. 35V's involvement also included content creation, social media support, player relations, and community outreach. That matters, because it shows the strategy isn't money to ownership. It's money plus audience, plus relationships, plus content, plus expertise to ownership. That's a much more powerful combination. Durant spent his entire career becoming one of the most recognizable athletes in the world. Now he's using that position to own pieces of the industries that benefit from sports becoming bigger. As a player, Durant gets paid for what he does on the court. As an investor and owner, he can participate in what grows around the court. And that is the transition most athletes never make. Now we can finally come back to the number that started this story, $1 billion. But there's an important distinction. Durant has crossed $1 billion in career earnings. That does not mean he currently has $1 billion sitting in cash. And it does not prove that his business portfolio itself is worth $1 billion. Career earnings, personal net worth, company valuations, and the value of private ownership stakes are completely different things. Forbes' current reporting establishes the career earnings milestone and his extensive business portfolio. So instead of pretending the math is simpler than it is, look at what Durant has actually built. An NBA career, endorsements, 35V, more than 80 investments, boardroom, media, sports ownership, and relationships across industries. Each layer creates another layer. The NBA creates attention. Attention creates access. Access creates relationships. Relationships create investment opportunities. Investments create ownership. Ownership creates more potential upside. And Boardroom gives Durant a platform that can amplify the entire network. That's the real plan. Not one magical investment, not one giant contract, not $1 billion check, a system where one advantage creates the next. And this is where Durant's story becomes bigger than the money. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. A normal person can't copy Kevin Durant's investment strategy. You can't simply open 35V. You can't walk into a Silicon Valley meeting with an NBA championship resume. You can't call an investor because you're a 16-time All-Star. You can't give a startup the global attention of Kevin Durant. So maybe the lesson isn't invest like Kevin Durant. It's build around the advantage you already have. Durant had basketball. Basketball gave him fame. Fame gave him access. Access introduced him to people who knew how to build companies. Those relationships helped create 35V. 35V created investments. Those investments created ownership. Boardroom turned relationships and stories into another platform. And eventually, Durant began owning pieces of sports itself. That's why the contract decision matters. That's why Silicon Valley matters. That's why Rich Kleiman matters. That's why Postmates matters. That's why Boardroom matters. They're not separate stories. They're different pieces of the same strategy. And the strategy is simple. Don't just maximize what you earn, maximize what earning it allows you to become. Kevin Durant has crossed $1 billion in career earnings, but that's not really the most impressive part. The impressive part is what happened between the checks. He turned an NBA career into access. He turned access into relationships. He turned relationships into investments. He turned investments into ownership. And he built platforms that could make those relationships even more valuable. So is Kevin Durant a genius investor? Maybe. But that's not even the most important answer. Because the bigger advantage was there before the first investment. It was Kevin Durant himself. His basketball career gave him something money couldn't buy, a seat at the table. And instead of using that seat to simply collect bigger checks, he started using it to get ownership. That's the difference. The NBA gave Durant the first advantage. He used that advantage to create another, then another, then another. And that's how you build something that can keep working even after the jump shot stops. The $1 billion or the scoreboard. The plan was everything that came before it. If you want more NBA stories that go beyond the box score and explain what is really happening behind the scenes, subscribe to NBA Echoes. And tell me, was Kevin Durant's greatest investment actually the money he put into these companies? Or was it the access that came from being Kevin Durant?